Yo, welcome, Eagles, to another edition of Trash Cat Night. Special guest, exclusive show. I brought my one friendship with me, Paul. He was sitting in the back and he just fell off the table. You all right, buddy? Anyways, we got a little Fedor here, and we're joined by DrPaulCottrell. Looking forward to another great show with Paul. We're going to be talking a little bird flu, college protests, AI. I always want to ask Paul about the economy, where we're standing with that. So maybe we'll start with that. Throw everyone a curveball thing and we'll start with the economy. But listen, follow Track and across all major social media outlets. Most active on TikTok, even though I'm on the last strike again over on TikTok. Consultation-wise, available 2 to 10 p.m. Eastern. Still available on Substack for all the archive shows from 2023 to 2014. Don't forget about sending me your special guest suggestions. We're now booking for early June, so reach on out. We'll make something happen. Folks, in order for me to do 3, 4, 5 shows a day at currently what we're doing with the paywall, going to need all hands on deck for 2024. It's not getting any easier. So please do help out. We had John Dean helping out this morning. Hopefully more people will. We'll, of course, rely upon the general donations as well as our sponsor program. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor here at Track Night, reach on out to me. We've got Samantha Wiesing, who is letting everyone know it's bug season. If you're looking for natural solutions to chemical pest control, you can contact Samantha at samantha.wiessi@gmail.com for 100% pure therapeutic grade essential oils. So welcome back to the sponsorship program. Samantha, we got John D, man, I just mentioned here a few minutes ago, is an advocate for the 8th Habit book, great book on leadership, also the website olrl.org, as well as Staying Strong with the 7 Soros devotion. And digitized expert preparation follow Leo Carley, Lisa Green, Sheila Dean, as well as Mr. Miller. Then we've got, what else do we got? We got 247rosary.com, playing the traditional rosary every half hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You sign up for the Wednesday Night Rosary Call program by contacting Joe Blazak at 247rosary.com. Having said that, we are ready to go with Dr. Paul Cottrell. And Paul, I think maybe we should start with the economy this month first. Throw everyone a little bit of a curveball before we dive deep into the old bird flu. Where are we at? How do you see the rest of the year playing out? Interest rates, what's real inflation? I don't know. Throw it all at us.
Well, I think we should start with the yen. The yen has been weakening relative to the USD. That's tied to interest rate carry trade between Japan and the United States. So there's a lot of volatility that's happening, at least with that pair for the currency market. Because the dollar is strengthening, it is affecting the oil market. On top of yesterday was economic data that came out that showed that we actually had more supply of oil. So there's been a buildup of inventory. So the WTI has been trading down the last 2 trading sessions. Now, so we have that situation going on with oil and the currency. Now with stocks, which is what most people take a look at, the Federal Reserve did an announcement yesterday, and they were on hold, but they have signaled that they may actually increase interest rates because of inflation not coming down as much as they would like. So there's the market participants want the Federal Reserve to actually bring down interest rates. But because inflation has been sticky, especially in items like housing and food, therefore there may be actually another rate hike this year. So how's that parlay to equities? I did a show back. It was I think it was 428, and I showed fib sequences between the bull rally that started last year, for the October of 2022, and the high point of the S&P 500, looking at SPY, the ETF. The resistance points right now is obviously the 524. Or if you're looking at the S&P 500 index, it would be the 5,240 mark. So that's the high point. Now there is some probability that this year that we'll be testing 550 for SPY. It's trading right now at about five. I don't know right now, but maybe 501, maybe 502, something like that. Now, what will happen is it's going to be bouncing around, and we said this on the last show. It's going to be bouncing around between the 524 and the 500 mark for the SPY. If 500 breaks, the next support level would be 483, based on these fib sequences. Now, if the 483 breaks, there is a very, very strong support level at the just above the 450 mark. The reason being is the 23% retracement and the 38% retracement of these two fib sequences, the new bull rally intersecting with a support level that comes from actually the 2020 crash. So there's a very, very strong support level at just above 450 at 483. There's resistance at the 520, around the 525 mark, and at the 550 mark. I believe what's going to happen is, and I've said this on the last show, and it seems to be playing out. I believe that there's going to be a retest of the 524, and if the market, if the world events like what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on with Taiwan, if the markets feel that it's risk on, not risk off, then there's more probability that we'll break through the 524 mark and march to the 550 mark for the SPY. If the world events are such that there is instability and there is a rush to the dollar and rush to treasuries, then we will fail that 524 test and march to probably the 483 support level.
Now, in general, I always get some funny comments when I post anything economic, whether it's positive or negative, really.
Right.
Everyone in the comment section trying to be a little sarcastic, and they'll always say, well, do I still have to pay my bills this week? I still pay my bills. So how bad does this get in your perspective? Again, I've seen a lot of big names over the last few weeks indicating that you believe stock market crash is going to happen, or a correction, however you want to put it, and that could tumble.
I don't think the stock market's going to crash in 2024. Okay. I think it actually has a higher probability to march to 550 than to test the 450 on the SPY. And I'm bullish. Now, if people have been paying attention, I mean, I've been saying this throughout the march, throughout the marching up the wall of worry from October of 2022, which is the beginning of the bull market. If they paid attention to me, they would have made a lot of money. Now, all you got to do, I've been telling people what I've been doing, and that is that once it hit about 500 a few months ago, I took some money off the table that I've invested in the SPY, and I told people to put around 12 to 15% of their money that they allocated into the stock market and put it into cash, put it into some sort of money market or into a CD. Wait for a correction. I think that correction will test that 483. If that happens, if there is a correction, it's going to test the 483. If something weird is going on, like a bank failure, like we had with SVB, last year was the last. Yeah, I think it was last year, a little bit more than a year ago. Then
bank that went down, Republic Bank in the Northeast Pennsylvania, New York.
Yeah, there was one. There was but it wasn't like the SVB. Because when SVB happened, there were a lot of analysts on Wall Street, because it happened at night when the news came out, at least with the people that are market participants, and they were on conference calls late into that night and early into the morning on what the hell it meant as contagion within the banking industry. So that's been stabilized. It's whatever failure did take place recently, it's nothing like the SVB. Now, so the point I'm making here is that if people were paying attention to what I did, they would have about 12 to 15% in cash, all right, waiting for a correction. Not a crash. It's not going to be a crash. It's going to be a correction. And that correction is either going to break the 283 mark or test and bounce off of the 450 mark. If the S&P 500 breaks the 280 mark, I'm going to redeploy the cash. And then I'm buying, on quote the dip or the correction, and then it'll retest the 524. It'll have enough energy to break through, and it will march to 555. I do think though that there will be a double top, and it'll come down, and that's where the correction is going to happen. So but long term meaning like at the end of the year, I think there's a higher probability being closer to 550 than at 450.
Paul's telling you, still gonna have to pay your bills this year, so
yeah,
make sure but in all seriousness, I know.
Not only that, if they pay attention to what I'm doing, you'd be able to make money in appreciation of the stock and pay your bills with the money that you just made.
You can pay Paul's bills. You can thank Paul's bills.
Well, I mean, anyone that appreciates the information that I give them, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
With the bird flu since the last time we talked, again, the headlines kind of keep coming. Now there's, a cat killing strain out in Texas. At least that's what they tell us. 1 in 5 milk containers now, got bird flu in it, killing penguins. What else did I see? Dolphins this week. All kinds of stuff. Give us your breakdown of the latest with the bird flu. Do you think this will be? Is there a potential that they try to lock us down later this year?
No. But let's unpack some of this a little bit because it's interesting. All right, their supercharged H5N1 and H7N9 and other versions of influenza in the laboratory manipulated to understand what exactly mutations have to happen for it to jump to humans. So there are gain of function research that's taking place on influenza. This has been documented for over 10 years in the mainstream media and in publications. This is not secret or anything. This has been out in the open for many, many years. Okay. With this particular version of H5N1, there are mutations in the H protein that allowed it to jump from avian species to mammals. In this case, cattle, and there are a few human cases from the exposure to cattle, but no cases of human to human exposure. The reason being is that the N protein also has to be mutated to allow for better transmission and replication. This particular version of H5N1 has mutations in the H, but does not have the truncated stalk that is needed to be supercharged that they've done in the laboratory. So everyone that's listening, the N protein is not supercharged. It's not going to spread around human to human. If that truncation was there, if the N protein stalk was truncated for this H5N1, I'd be very scared. Maybe even more scared than SARS-CoV-2. But it's not. So don't worry about it. Now let's get into what the media is projecting and what it means down the road. The media is trying to scare people that, okay, there's cows where 1 in 5 that have been milked have been found through analysis to have this H5N1 in the milk supply. Most of the milk out there that someone buys is pasteurized or ultra pasteurized. So the chances of you contracting a very low chance to contract H5N1 through your milk is like super, super low. All right. One, it's already been destroyed because of the heating process. But even if there was a particle that you ended up drinking, it's going to go through your gut and pass through. Most people don't even realize that you get exposed to polio virus and you pass it through. All right. And that's live. All right. So I wouldn't worry about it. I'm still drinking my milk and I have zero worry about H5N1 in my milk supply, but there are going to be people that are scared. So what's going to happen? You're going to start hearing more and more cases of cows getting sick, which makes sense because the mutations are there in the H5N1 to be able to jump from avian to cattle and goats and some other mammal species. All right. But for humans to worry about it, it's not there. But what will happen is I would not be surprised that the agencies that govern livestock in the United States will force farmers to vaccinate their livestock against this version H5N1. Some people don't want to be consuming milk products or, meat that has been vaccinated. So you're going to have a group of people that will stop eating meat or dairy products for a while. So I'm just concerned that the media is going to spin it, create fear, and people will actually, change their buying behavior.
Let's say for this year, I forget what guy came out and said on the science side. He said that there's a decent possibility that it could bird flu could jump to human beings and kind of stick. Like I know this happened, every once in a while here in the United States and Europe and stuff. But he says there's a real strong possibility that this could be our next pandemic. You got Robert Redfield saying COVID was set up for bird flu down the road. What's the likelihood of that strain? Again, I think last time we talked, I put that article up from the Daily Mail or whatever it was, where the U.S. government was working with China to create a new strain of bird flu, and there's predictive programming out there which suggests it too, such as the Fifth Wave movie. Bird flu was the one where everyone got quarantined and all that kind of good stuff into the quarantine camps or whatever. But what's the likelihood? Are you saying something?
Here's the issue. All right. You would have to have for it to stick to humans. When we say stick to humans, meaning human to human transmission, not just contracting it from a cattle, through panhandling. All right. If it is human to human transmission, there needs to be several things that have to mutate in the natural world. All right. Assuming that nothing gets released. All right. Because you got two different possibilities here. Something that's released that's supercharged, which I said that the H5N1 is not. All right. But could something be released that is supercharged that hides underneath this story? Yes. But if we assume that nothing is forcefully released or even accidentally released from a supercharged lab, the chances of the particular things that have to happen for mutation in the the N protein, and the replicase complex is so low probability that it's not going to happen. If it does happen, this does happen, and you have there are these different proteins. There's 4 different proteins that create the complex for replication. If those 4 different proteins mutate in such a way where it increases the ability to replicate in humans and the truncation of the N protein, all happening in a very, very short amount of time, that is fingerprints of a leak, not something that's natural. So if someone's going to ask me, will this naturally turn into some major event for humans? I would say very low probability naturally. But if you have this replicase complex mutation, series of mutations on the H protein, mutations for the truncation of the N protein, then I would say I'm really scared because it's supercharged. and that's coming from a laboratory, and we got to worry. And then, and when that happens, they're going to force everyone. Again, they're going to be screaming about get your flu vaccine, because they're going to spin it as though this is the next, Spanish flu kind of situation. So as long as they keep their supercharged stuff in the laboratory, I am not losing sleep over this. But once those series of mutations pop up very quickly, in quote in nature, then that's the fingerprint that something was released.
For know that this is a weaponized one, and in the movie The Fifth Wave, that's exactly what they said. It was a weaponized bird. It wasn't like a natural organic. It was something weaponized, like a bioweapon. So I mean, what would we be looking for? See headlines like over like a 2 or 3 day period where it's like you start seeing like a whole bunch of people getting it in one state, or like how do you see the headlines playing out on that?
Well, there's going to be some sort of patient zero that it takes place probably around a farm, because they'll probably try to hide the leak and attribute it to some sort of natural event. So it's going to be probably in the Midwest somewhere, in some sort of rural community, some farm area.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're going to hear multiple states getting these different versions of it. And they're going to attribute it to some sort of flocking birds that, migrated at some sort of tri-state boundary. There's lots of states, right? And there's lots of tri-state boundaries that, intersect, that are rural, that it would pop up. So I figure it would be in that kind of environment, not in an urban setting. I doubt that it would be in a New York. It has a higher probability being, on a farm in Texas or in Michigan or in Wisconsin.
Now, in terms of again with a weaponized version, like what would be the kill rate on that? Would that be something like 60, 70, like 80%, like something so high that it would get people to be caught in a catch-22 again? Like I know with the whole COVID thing, really after I don't know, was it maybe the first week or so, really began to know and understand this thing had like a real low kill rate to it. I know the first few days I even had some family that ran out and unfortunately got it. From my perspective, and they have some health issues now as a result of that. Nothing like major and crazy, but still vertigo with thrombosis and all kinds of stuff like that. But what I mean, with this one, what would you say?
There are two types. There are two types, two categories that I'll use for the supercharge H5N1. One category is that it does not fly underneath the radar of the antivirals. So there's like a neuroamidase inhibitors and other antivirals that help to treat influenza. All right. Those are effective. That would be effective for one type of category of supercharge. There's another type that's I'll call supercharge plus, where they don't work with, that version doesn't work with those antivirals. So you have a supercharge and a supercharge plus, drugs that will work and drugs that will not work. If what is released, the antivirals will work, then we don't have much of a problem. And actually, we were talking about stock market. You would want to, put some money into some of these pharmaceuticals that are going to be selling the Tamiflu and these neuroamidase inhibitors and all this stuff. All right, because they'll make a lot of money in a very short amount of time. If the Supercharge Plus is released, then you're talking about pandemonium and potentially lockdowns and supply chain disruption. But the chances that the way these New World Order types work, Eric, is that they don't use the same playbook all the time. They use something that's different. There was a 9/11. There was the pandemic. There's always some sort of financial crisis. They'll do something different.
It could be everything at once. Yeah.
Well, maybe. I mean, maybe it's a shotgun of everything. I don't know, but.
Off on the pandemic tree, I think somewhere here in late May, I thought it was like the 27th through first, and kind of like finalize everything. So a lot of people are scratching their heads like, okay, what's the time this? Then you got to take into consideration the elections are upcoming. So that's why I said if it's going to happen this year, I don't think it's going to happen for spring or summer. I think this is going to be a summer of chaos. I know we're going to segue into the protests happening here between protests on campus. They want to start race war. I mean, you got Democrats versus Republicans. You've got pro-choicers versus pro-lifers. I mean, they're really trying to just stir it all up, I think, this summer. But in terms of, where was I going with that? Oh, I think it would happen in September, October, like right before the elections. You know what I mean? If that's what they're planning.
Well, I agree with you. Something probably is going to happen in September, October, November. Now, on my shows, I've been explain to the audience about soul roots and the idea of Esau and the soul root of Jacob and of Ishmael. Now, throughout the day, there's a certain combination of God's name. God has a name, and there's letters to the name of the Tetragrammaton, and those letters can be permutated in a different order that corresponds to the different months of the year and corresponds to the different hours of the day. Throughout the day and throughout the months of the year, there is an ebb and flow of strength from a particular soul root. So we are right now we just passed the apex of the strength of the soul root of Jacob in April. And we're starting to come back down. And so for 6 months, Jacob is stronger. The soul root is stronger. So that happened around near the end of January, about beginning of February, because it's all based on lunar. And it, is playing out. It ends in July. The soul root strength for Jacob starts to wane. It will be below the 0 line at the end of July. And that means that Esau's soul root goes above the 0 line in August. Well, it's October where the soul root of Esau is the strongest. So if you take a look at the history of certain conflicts in the Middle East, they happen in October. Black Hawk Down happened in October. Things that we've done that didn't turn out very well in terms of military operations for the United States in the Middle East happened in October. So I suspect that there will be a strengthening of Esau, and that some sort of event, I don't know what that event is. I don't know if it's domestic or if it's going to be international, but some sort of event will happen. And it's not by accident when we say the October surprise. So I agree with you. Something is in the works, but seeing it happen, I don't think it's bird flu. I don't think it's financial crash. I think it has something to do with an Occupy movement that may turn terrorist. There's a cell or something that's activated.
False flags, yeah. Okay, for sure. Yeah, blame it on Iran, China, or some terrorist group or whatever. Yeah, no, that'll definitely happen too. I agree. I honestly think it's gonna be everything. I don't know what happened this year though.
See, they don't want to spin the whole enchilada because Trump might get into office and they're going to have to do something in 2025. They're going to have to do, I mean, if they do everything, they won't have anything left on the table. Well, who knows? I'll tell you, the red heifers, I don't know if you've been following it or not, but there were 5 red heifers that were sent from Texas to Israel. Into the West Bank, actually, which is strange. And now there are 4 that are still kosher for slaughter. My understanding is they're 3 years old. Now, according to Jewish law, they have to be slaughtered between age 3 and age 4. All right. It's coming up. Something has to be slaughtered this year or early next year. So
I read the latest was supposed to be Passover, but now they're saying Shabbat. I'm not sure what Passover.
Yeah,
they're saying
Shavuos.
June 13th.
Yeah, Shavuos. There was a line of thought thinking that you need, that they can be sacrificed anytime, basically. I mean, as long as it's 3 to 4 years old and they're kosher, right? And then there's a bunch of laws on who can do it, how they're doing it, all this stuff, right? So everything has to be perfect for me to make this thing work. Right, right. But the thing is it's not just one priest. It's like it's if you read the details, there has to be someone watching, there has to be someone slaughtering, and then there's a question: is the slaughterer the same person that actually marches the pieces of the red heifer to the altar? There needs to be a sprinkling that happens. That's usually done by the watcher, not by the slaughterer. So there's a bunch of stuff there's very detailed law called paraduma, and there's 15 chapters on what can happen, how this is all plays out, and it's not just the ashes. It's the collecting of the ashes. It's the storing of the ashes. It's the separation of the ashes. The ashes have to be separated into three parts, and three different groups get it. And there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen. Now, if this all happens, all right, which hasn't happened for over 2,000 years, you know, I suspect that it's going to be one of the biggest events that's televised around the world, on all the major news networks as they're burning the 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 red heifers on the altar, because this thing is not good. For them to burn this thing has to burn for 24 hours or more, because it has to be completely ash. And if there are any bones, they have to smash the bones into ash. So this is a big process. And so, cows are big. And that flame on Mount Olive is going to be broadcasted for at least 24 hours around the world. Now, just imagine if you're one of the more than 1 billion Muslims that are in the world. When they see that, they are gonna have a shit fit, a total shit fit, because that's going to be the start of the countdown for bringing down the Dome of the Rock. It starts then. I mean, literally the stopwatch starts at that moment in time.
Yeah, like I said, it's nutty stuff.
Well, if the red heifer, talking about an October event, that might be the event. But what I don't understand though is that I could create the argument: do you sacrifice the red heifer in the strength of Jacob, or do you sacrifice the red heifer in the strength of Esau? Because if it's in the strength of Jacob, then maybe you're saying, okay, you have the people that have the soul root to Jacob are getting a spiritual energy that's not muted, because they're in its full strength at that moment in time in the year. If it's the power of Esau, you can make the argument you need to do the sacrifice, because that's where darkness is. That's where some of the evil is. So you have to do the sacrifice to purify the evil inclination and stuff. So I'm not sure. Now, from the law of paraduma, you can sacrifice it basically any time of the year. I'm not sure if you can do it on on a holiday or the Sabbath. I'm not sure. I don't think you can. But besides those kinds of restrictions, you can sacrifice it any time of the year as long as it's age 3 to age 4. So, and it doesn't have any blemish or any problem.
Get to that point, yeah, whether it's June or October, November, it's going to be this year.
But they have 4, and so this could be sequenced. It could happen. One happens. See, this thing could get so crazy that they may not they may not slaughter all 4. They may do the first one, all right? Because you got to remember, they can make a mistake and it's all bad. If something happens, the sprinkling of the blood or the burning of the heifer or the slaughtering of the heifer, if it's not perfect, it doesn't work. So it's very possible that the first one they do isn't good. All right? So you got that problem. But just assume that they practice this somehow, all right, and that they ran it through, and they know exactly what they're doing, and that no one's going to make a mistake, and they slaughter all 4. It's very possible that they do 1, or 2 this year, and another 2 next year. which will add fuel as the ones that are coming from the soul root of Esau are going to just freak out. You're going to have the Muslim community freaking out, and you're going to start seeing people that are unreligious, non-religious. I'll call them the ultra liberal in the United States. You'll actually start seeing them acting like kids. They're going to have like hissy fits, and
Start again, I've noticed just, I mean, crazy behavior. You see that sharp shooting down there, that guy kind of popped off.
Mhm.
I mean, there's not a day that doesn't go by where I just read some kind of headline that speaks to, the rise of the demonic. And I think, I think we're well on our way, like I said, I mean, there's even some certain Catholic prophecies that talk about that, where everyone just pitilessly slaughters everyone, brother versus brother, even. It's not even like race war or gender war or anything like that. It gets down to the family level, even. So that's kind of what I wanted to ask you next in terms of like, what are you kind of feeling or gauging? My last guest was from New York City too. Got his thoughts on the latest there in New York City, but you kind of get that feeling, especially tying it into the protest where everyone's sort of just on angst now.
Yes. I mean, here's the problem. One, it's a dense area, and this protest is starting to turn into a BLM kind of event. It's just starting because, you've heard some of these protesters demanding food because of, some sort of colonial, some sort of colonizing oppression and all this stuff. So this is gonna be the summer of not just the protest being pro Hamas or pro Palestinian, but it's actually going to be anti-white, anti the oppressor, in their eyes, and they're going to be promoting reparations. So this is going to be a year where it's not just going to be anti-Semitic, it's going to be racial. It's going to be black versus white. This thing is going to metastasize into a new type of BLM kind of summer. And if we remember when BLM started burning down the town, that was in 2020, right? They tried to, create kind of a race riot during the election. This is an election year again. There's much evidence out there that, there are outside influencers that are coming in funding these university protests.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's not just Soros. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 different professional organizations that love to, stir up stuff. It's feeling like, to me, from what I'm seeing in New York, it's feeling like a BLM / Occupy movement. So we had the Occupy Wall Street movement back when Lehman blew up, right? Well, this is feeling like a combination of the two. There's this Occupy movement that can metastasize into burning down the town. That's very similar to a BLM. I'm just waiting for some black person that is hurt or killed in these riots, and it's going to explode. It's just going to totally explode.
Bring that up because I mentioned race war. I think I was the only Catholic media to bring this up, and I haven't really seen anyone in alternative media bring up this. There actually is a story out there. It happened April the 18th. His name's Frank Tyson here in Canton, Ohio. It was a George Floyd 2 moment when he was being chased down by some cops after some bar fight or something. Hit a pole, fell off this pole, then a cop stomped on his neck again. Sounds familiar, right? He says, "I can't breathe." So here, I can't breathe part 2, and he died. Now it hasn't hit mainstream yet. I think this story's going to pick up news. Although my last guest was black and in New York City, he seems to think that's going to die out. I don't really think so, but I'm right there with you. It's always interesting how these stories come up in election year, but they are trying to stoke that race war, and yeah, they're very much aligned with the pro-choicers, the feminists, all those kind of socialists, the communists. And then on the other side, like Albert Pike said, because if you read, I don't know if you've ever read Albert Pike's work, but he said in conjunction with World War III, there would be an internal civil war between the left and right. You can see that brewing now. On the left, you get the socialists, the communists, the feminists, the pro-choicers, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Palestinian protesters. And then on the right side, you're going to have your conservatives. You're going to have patriot types. You're going to have the MAGA supporters, because I think they're going to string along the whole Trump going to jail thing too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So for me, it's just the way it's being scripted out. some of these states that they're throwing out there, especially with the feminists and pro-choice movement, June the 24th, which ties in with Gay Pride Month. So don't forget about the LGBT,
That's right.
but that's part of the left. So I kept saying like June, July to me, man. Like I think it's just going to be an absolute shit show. I wouldn't want to be in the city personally.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be that bad. But
no, I sense that this thing is going to metastasize into, actually destruction of property and burning down,
sure.
certain, it's going to be potentially similar to what BLM. Now, what is interesting about your observation with this black guy that was killed, Frank Tyson? All right, perhaps, it didn't explode because these organizations are resource constrained, and that they had to make a decision. Are they going to put their money towards the university issue and go with the anti-Palestinian, or I'm sorry, the anti-Israeli, pro-Palestinian protests, or go and create this kind of like new, BLM, rioting? I think the strategy that they have is that demonize white males, demonize Jewish people, put them in the category as the colonizers and the oppressors, and they're going to, turn this into some sort of, as you say, shit show, right into November's election. And there's going to be a high probability of some sort of physical conflict between the two crowds.
Sure. Yeah, I've seen kind of prophecies where they'll burn down churches. I mean, I'm sure they'll burn down synagogues.
Yeah, I mean, but I was watching the news last night, and I was actually, I felt kind of proud in a way. All right, let me explain it. All right, I was proud in two ways. One was that you had a group of college students that actually rose the American flag. I'm not sure what university it was. They took down a Palestinian flag, and then they rose up the American flag, and then they sung the national anthem. So, there is this element that's like, okay, you've got to fight these protests by standing strong and not backing down. Another thing that I thought was pretty cool, and I think this happened at the Columbia one, but it may have been the UCLA. Maybe it was UCLA. And there were pro-Israel protesters shooting fireworks towards, pro-Palestinian protesters. So you're starting to see the actual, pseudo civil war happening within the protest movement. I actually think we need to see more of that. There's too many people out there of that generation that have just seen violence through video games and not actually exercised violence. And I think we're at a point in this country that we need to stand up for what the country really stands for. And we can't let these ultra liberals take the country down.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, I would agree with you there too. Everyone's got their own hill they're going to die upon. You know what I mean?
Well, I think, back even in 2020 when there was this MAGA movement versus the Antifa movement, and you had like Captain America punching out, some Antifa guy. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. We need Captain America.
Yeah. That's what these leotards get out there, Paul. Get some leotards.
Yeah.
You'll be Captain Resistance.
I just think we need Captain America out there. Yeah.
Let's see here. A little over 5 minutes left here, Paul. I know you want to talk about AI a little bit, so let's go down that rabbit hole before we.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a big subject. I think well, no, I mean that, I guess we can, we can talk about it a little bit now, but there is. Do you know Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank? Shark Tank. Yeah. Well, he was, Mr. Wonderful. He was mentioning, with the high resolution cameras and artificial intelligence, that these protesters are basically throwing away what he called their personal brand, their individual brand, and the ability for them to have jobs, at least, jobs where they're moving up the corporate ladder into the C-suite. So I think he's bringing up a good point. And that is that over time, we have this surveillance technology that's being built out that's putting people into either permanent status of unemployable because they decided to protest on something they believed in. Okay, because this thing could work against this thing that he's talking about. It's working against the pro-Palestinians protesters. But what if you're actually fighting against the government because of forced vaccinations or forced, forced, whatever it is, right? So, we have a surveillance state using artificial intelligence and high resolution cameras that will put people into a box. And I wonder if the society will become, just be limp, pacified and limp, or will they actually galvanize and tear down the national security state?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. Yeah. Will people become pacified, or will they raise up and get even,
Because it's going to get to the point where, someone applies for a job. Let's say they have a good resume, all right? And then all of a sudden they feed it into the AI, and the AI goes, they were a protester for such and such on such university on such date, and here's all the evidence, And so it's going to be actually HR departments are going to end up being little NSA departments within a corporation. I don't think they should have that power.
They want to take it as far as pre-crime. I mean, it's not like while it's happening, they want to identify who they think is going to be a problem beforehand. Maybe like Minority Report or something.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, but the only answer to that is not allow it to be built out. You need to tear it down. This is why I think that these Blade Runners in the UK tearing down those cameras, I think that's the right answer. Right.
Yeah. So so like I said, everyone's going to have their own hill to die upon. I had a guest last week, Rick Hinshaw. He's a Catholic writer for Newsmax. His brother, and I didn't know this until he mentioned this on the show. He was just out in front of D.C. just protesting, the pro-choice, the clinic out there, or whatever. And he was one of the 9 or 10 that got busted. I mean, they didn't even do anything. Like, they didn't harm anyone. He's getting 10 years. I said, listen, as much as I'm a pro-lifer, we all got our hill to die upon. I don't know if it's worth it, to take a 10-year hit for going out there. But like you said, it's going to get to a certain point where people are just going to say, and I think we're at that point. People are saying enough is enough. With IRS and taxes, all the illegals coming across, crime is like at an all-time high, mental health crisis at an all-time high. Like, people are just on edge. And it's just like, what's going to be that one? I can't even say it's going to be one spark. It's kind of already happened, like you said now, these protests. I think it's just going to keep, the fire's just going to keep stoking and stoking, man. You know what I mean? They could just add another layer, and,
people are going to have problems getting jobs in the AI world, not only because of past behavior, but also because corporations won't need as many employees. So, people are going to start feeling the pressure of being unemployed, not being able to pay their bills. You were talking about paying your, bills and then all this stuff when we were talking earlier, right? People, how do they pay their bills? Well, it's going to get a lot worse. It's going to get a lot worse when there is a AI version of ex-employees at a corporation and they're, reducing their head count.
Also, I can't even say. I don't know if the headcount collapse can happen this year. I understand what you're saying. I mean, maybe it's next year or whatnot, but ultimately we know they want to go into full-blown socialist communist.
Yeah, for sure.
What's it going to do when you describe this? As you get more and more people who don't have jobs like this or that, when it does tank out and then everyone's looking for that digital UBI, it's going to be so easy to catch on to. Like, oh yeah, well I'll take the 500 or 1,000 because I got nothing. I haven't had anything.
You've interviewed Gail, right? Yeah, Gail Angeles.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
All right. So, I talked to her a couple weeks ago about this subject. All right. And she thinks, and I think she's right. All right. I wish she wasn't right, but she's right. What's going to happen is that people are going to buy into this whole universal income. All right. As we start to see this downward spiral in the job market because of artificial intelligence and the debt of our nation, right, and the instability in the world. We have proven as a people that we're not willing to actually fight for our freedoms. Right after 9/11 and during 2020, it was very obvious, all right, that we weren't willing to tear down the national security state and the things that they were doing to erode our constitutional freedoms. People were afraid to do it. They're not going to do it. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a generation that's young right now, very young, that is going to start feeling this pressure that's building up. And in 30 years, the only thing that can happen is to force the society into a darkness. And that darkness is going to be something like an EMP, a forced domestic EMP to put the society, destroy the national security state, destroy the electronic grid, and go back to like the 1600s. Now, that means that a lot of people are going to die. That means that over a year, supply chains are disrupted, food shortages will happen, and there are going to be communities that survive, and there are going to be big communities like New York that will die off. But that's what is needed to actually save the Constitution. Now, the question is the Constitution more important than any individual or any family? I would say yes, but I may be, in a minority group thinking that. I think the far majority of the people out there will side on self-preservation and throw away the Constitution and its ideals. I think that's the wrong way to do it, but there's going to be a group of people out there in 30 years that decide to EMP the country and to save to prevent this tyranny that will keep on growing.
Now, we only have 2 minutes left here. We can give us off most time. Phil Galton is David Phillips, the original prepper, man behind strategic relocation. He seems to think that the EMP is no later than 2027. He says it could be earlier than that. So we'll see what happens.
But that was an EMP probably from an external force, like a foreign adversary. What Gail's thinking is that this is going to be domestic, that it's going to be the generation that's just being born. The generation that's being born is going to say they had enough of it, and they're going to tear down the government by destroying the grid.
We've got about 90 seconds left here. Paul, I got to get ready for Dr. Anthony sign. What do we have? Well, we know you got some great products.
Yes. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I have structural nano silver products, lozenges and liquids and gels. I also have C60, which is a very strong antioxidant. And I have partnered up with Boomer Products, and I have a plethora of supplements that help bring down inflammation and boost up your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
All right. Join us. As I said, we got Dr. Anthony Stein. Join us next. Until next time, stay safe with us.